One. And good evening, everybody, and welcome to the council budget meeting for Wednesday, November the 16th, 2022. I would ask that you now please rise for the playing of the national anthem and a moment of reflection.
Oh, Canada, our home and native land, true patriot love in all of us command. Car ton bras s'est porté le pays, il s'est porté la croix. Ton histoire est une épopée des plus brillants exploits. God keep our land glorious and free. Oh, Canada, we stand on guard for thee. Oh, Canada, we stand on guard for thee.
Thank you. I'll now look to Councillor Lindell to read the land acknowledgement.
The land on which Council meets today is the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee and Anishinaabe peoples, many of whom continue to live and work here today. This territory is covered by the Upper Canada Treaties and is within the land protected by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Agreement. Today, this gathering place is home to many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples. Acknowledging this is a reminder that our great standard of living is directly related to the resources and friendship of Indigenous people.
All right, thank you, Councillor. Item number one is the chair's report. I'll be completely honest, I haven't prepared a chair's report for this very, very early meeting, given that I've got about 36 hours on the job so far. I will say there are a number of changes coming down from the province. They're coming fast and furious over the last couple of weeks. Another one came today. So there will be updates aplenty as time goes on, but I think we are all still trying to digest the latest piece of information from the provincial government. So we'll move on to item two, which is the adoption of the agenda. And the clerk has advised me that there are no amendments being made to today's agenda. So can I have a motion to adopt the agenda? Councillor McPherson and seconded by Councillor Williamson. All in favor? Any opposed? Seeing none, that is carried. Number three is adoption of the minutes, and there are no minutes to adopt, so we'll go on to item four, which is declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of pecuniary interest this evening? Looking to Zoom, looking to the chamber, I am seeing none. I will go to item 5, which is the motion to move consent reports. There are no reports that have been requested to be moved from consent. So can I have a mover to approve the consent agenda? Councillor Kushner is moving it. And can I have a seconder? Councillor Lindell.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Councillor Garcia.
Yes, I just had one question.
Councillor, I think you muted yourself inadvertently.
I did, I just realized that. I said I had one question of one item on consent, and I didn't want to pull it, but it's just a simple question on the capital expenditure update. Is it okay to ask that now, or do you want me to pull the report?
I'll look to the clerk. I know regionally we can ask questions without pulling the entire report.
As long as it's something simple, I think it's fine to do it now.
All right, Councillor Garcia, go ahead. You can ask your question now.
Okay, just in terms of, pardon me, through you, Mr. Mayor, in terms of the updates on the large projects, I was just wondering from Director Martuccio, I guess, or his staff, why was there such a large transfer of funds required for the Page Street project in terms of as a proportion of the whole project? I'm sure there's a good reason for it, but it struck me that it was quite large in proportion to the original budget.
All right, I am looking around and I will look to Ms. Douglas. She's in the hot seat tonight, so.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor, to the councillor. With regards to the Page Street project, there were anticipated to be certain complexities with regards to the project in the design phase. So there were additional studies that were required so that these budget funds were actually required to be transferred for that. So that's why the additional budget dollars. Our capital planning supervisor is here with us, Richie Chung, and perhaps he may have additional information to add as well.
Mr. Chung, no additional information? Excellent.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, for allowing me to do that.
Definitely. Thank you, Councillor. So then we have a mover and a seconder for this. So I will look to the clerk. Sorry, I have a mover. I don't need a seconder on this one. But I'll look to the clerk to read the list of consent reports and call the roll.
Today's consent agenda includes item 6.1, year-to-date report 2022 third quarter operating variance and forecast report. Item 6.2 from Financial Management Services, capital project report for the third quarter ended September 30th, 2022. And item 6.3, Legal and Clerk Services, Council Correspondence. Councillor Kushner.
Yes.
Councillor Garcia.
Yes.
Councillor Lindell.
Yes.
Councillor McPherson.
Yes.
Councillor Miller.
Yes.
Councillor Ratzlaff.
Yes.
Councillor Stevens.
Yes.
Councillor Williamson.
Yes.
And Mayor Cisco.
Yes.
And that's carried.
All right, on to number 7. There are no presentations. However, I am going to read the declaration to all presenters because we do have several presentations coming up under reports. So as a reminder to all of us, council chambers in all municipalities in our country represent the seat of local democracy. Many acts that govern us understand the necessity of the collective voice when decisions are being made to grow our spaces, pass our bylaws, and to seek opinions into very complex issues, ensuring safe spaces for all in our public discourse. We recognize the right of the majority to decide, the minority to be heard, the public to have an opportunity to participate, and all participants to be treated with courtesy and respect. It is imperative that elected officials, citizens, and staff have input, and it is paramount that we listen to one another and question one another, but that we understand we do this in a way that never undermines any person's ability or their dignity in our chambers. We respect the right for everyone to have an opinion and remind the audience views of the public do not always reflect those of the corporation of the City of St. Catharines. So with that, we will move on to discussion reports and item 8.1, which is the St. Catharines Public Library Orientation and 2023 Budget Presentation. And I will call on Ken Sue, the Chief Executive Officer, Karen Smith-Curtis, the Business Administrator, and Janice Coles, the Library Board Chair, to present the Public Library's proposed 2023 budget.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of Council, for inviting the St. Catharines Public Library to share some of our history and our accomplishments and to present our 2023 budget. Could I have the next slide, please? And the next one. As you may know, the St. Catharines Public Library has been around for a while. We were established in 1888, and we currently operate under the Ontario Public Libraries Act of 1990. This requires that a public library be under the control and management of a board appointed by City Council. The board has to have at least 5 members. We currently have 9 members, 2 of whom are councillors. We operate as a governance board, and we appoint a CEO who's responsible for day-to-day operations. Next slide, please. Thank you. We started out in a Masonic temple on Ontario Street in 1888, moved to a Carnegie Library in 1905, had branches in 1939 at the Armories, and then 1961 in Grantham, Meridian, and Port. In 1976, the Centennial Library opened. That, of course, was the centenary of the incorporation of St. Catharines as a city. 1997 and 1999 saw computer innovations, public internet, and a computer training lab. 2012, we opened the Dr. Huck family branch, and it replaced the Grantham branch. And in 2017, we served Western Hill by opening lockers at the Seymour Hanna Arena. The next slide, please. Our vision is to have a community enriched by lifelong opportunities for learning and connection. Our mission is that we provide spaces, resources, and experiences for all citizens to learn, grow, and connect. Our goals are to embrace innovation, creativity, and boldness in everything we do, build a recognized and valued brand, foster more community connections, be a library for all, and transform as we evolve. The next slide, please. I will now pass the baton to Ken Su, our CEO.
Thanks, Janice. Good evening, Mr. Mayor and members of the council. My name is Ken Su, and I'm the CEO of the library. So tonight, I'm going to share with you some high-level information on library services and programs. Of course, if you want to know more about the library, I would love to meet you in person and give you a tour, or we can meet online if you prefer. So the library currently has 5 service points in the city, as Janice mentioned earlier. So 4 of them provide comprehensive services and programs. The Centennial branch, which is also our central library, is the largest branch. It situates just right across the James Street from City Hall. It's a 3-story building with a basement. The total floor space is roughly about 35,000 square feet. Currently, the first and second floors are for public use, while library staff, they are located in the basement and on the 3rd floor. So we are hoping to renovate the Central Library in the coming years to add additional public space and better support our future programming and the library operations. The Dr. Huck family branch is our newest branch. As Janice mentioned, it was built in 2012 and is located in the Kiwanis Aquatic Center. It's a shared multi-purpose facility, and in my view, I think it's a perfect example of partnership between the city and the library. The public, they can go there, swimming, and then visit the library when they are in the building. The Merritt branch is on Hartle Road. It's in the same plaza with Food Basics, if you know the area. The library actually rents the space from Smart Center, and the lease has been confirmed until March 31st, 2024. The city and the library have been discussing the location and the space of the branch in the last number of years, and we are trying to find a way to provide the best possible library service in that neighborhood. For Duluth branch is on Brock Street and is our smallest branch with limited hours. The library is currently working with the city to investigate a solution. Possibly, we are hoping we can increase service hours in the future. In addition to those 4 branches I mentioned earlier, we also have a vending machine service at the Seymour Hanna Arena. So our customers can just use their library card to borrow library items from a vending machine. They just swipe their card, or they can pick up their codes from the lockers there. Next slide, please. So as a public library, we do have a very comprehensive collection of materials, and that collection has always been appreciated by our customers. So our collection contains over 230,000 physical items. We have 25,000 ebooks and audiobooks, as well as 30 different databases. In 2021, although our service was negatively impacted by COVID, and we had to reduce our service hours and limit indoor capacity, the annual circulation was still over 700,000 in total. And also, we always tell everybody, whenever they talk about the library, our library offers more than just books. We have video games, DVDs, audio books, and in recent years, we introduced many new innovative items as the library strategic plan basically said, be innovative, be creative. And we actually call those items as a library of things. So that kind of includes things like sports equipment, memory care kits, telescopes, park passes, and the most recent addition, if you may have heard on the radio or saw in the paper, is that we just launched our music instrument yesterday, added to that collection, so people can borrow ukulele, electric keyboard, drum kits, things like that. And the library also offers many exciting programs to the community, such as story time, book club, author visits. And if you do come to see us in person, we have 3D printers at the library you can use. You can also use our microfilm reader. We have free internet at the library, and of course, our welcoming public space for everybody in the community to enjoy. Next slide, please. As one of the last few free service providers left in the city, and also we have free open public space, we actively look for opportunities to partner with our community organizations. We have been working with Ontario Attorney General's Office since 2020, after COVID started, to offer free virtual court service to anyone who doesn't have a, secure space, with a high-speed internet connection, so they can come to the library to attend their virtual court sessions. We also partner with the city on a regular basis to organize and participate in various culture and community events, such as Pumpkinville, Culture Days. And there are, of course, many other partners we work with, such as St. Catharines Museum, Ontario Genealogy Society, Brock University, just to name a few. Next slide, please. So despite the challenges we have had caused by the pandemic, the library has actually made great progress in the last few years. And now I'm going to share with you some accomplishments we made in year of 2022. So you may remember that the library introduced the Fine Free concept in 2021 for children, teens, and seniors in order to reduce barriers to access to our materials and to support our strategic goal as being a library for all. We have seen great success after 1 year trial period, and as a result, the library board has recently approved to remove fines for all residents starting next year. The library also standardized its service hours on May 2nd this year and has increased the total opening hours by 19%, or 32 hours, basically from 167 hours per week pre-pandemic. Now we are sitting at 199 hours. The library also got rebranded in May, and we launched our new robot service in July. We started to send out e-newsletters in October and replaced our HVAC actually this month in November. The library has done quite a bit work on its central renovation project and has worked with the architect firm War 99 to complete the first phase. That's a conceptual design phase. And we presented the final report to the board in October, and we also shared a copy with the city. And our board chair will talk about that in a little bit more detail at the end of this presentation. So now I'm going to pass it on to Karen, who's going to talk about our 2023 budget.
All right, thank you, Ken. We could go to slide 11, please. One more, thank you so much. So as we move into the overview of the 2023 budget, it's important to understand the context, the environment that we're operating in. We understand the city's needs through the time of the pandemic, and in 2021, we did not ask for any increase to our library budget, so we had the same budget in 2020 and 2021. In 2017 and 2018, our funding from the cities was reduced a total of 3.1% over those 2 years. the outcomes of these is that we are getting less funding per citizen than a lot of our peers. We get funded at about $42.65 per resident. A lot of our peer libraries, being libraries of equal population size, are getting funded at about $47.67 per resident. If we were funded at the same rate, we would actually have a budget that was $685,000 higher than what we currently have. In addition, I think it's another point of comparison would be the Niagara Falls Public Library, which funds their library at $54.40 per resident compared to our number. If we were funded at the same rate as Niagara Falls, we would have a budget about $1.6 million higher. And finally, my last comment will be that since 2023, Niagara Falls had a 29% increase in their funding. We have had a 10% increase. So that has really put us behind compared to our peers. And it does affect the services that we can provide to the citizens of St. Catharines because our budget is a little lower. Next slide, please. So this slide shows the 2023 operating budget as approved by our board of directors at their meeting on October 20th. So we're actually overall looking at a relatively modest increase for 2023 of 5.3% in total in expenses and therefore matching in revenues. The city does provide about 95% of our funding. The province provides about 3.5% of our funding, and this has not changed in about 30 years. It's been a consistent dollar amount. It has not increased with inflation. We are very limited in our ability to raise our own revenues. We will be providing about 1.4% of the revenues in 2023, but we are limited on what we can do to earn our own revenues. By far, our most significant driver of cost are our salaries and benefits, which make just under 71% of our budget in total. Our collections account for about 12.3% of our budget, while occupancies and supplies and the other bits make up the remainder. They're relatively small though. Next slide, please. Thank you. So there are two components to our request for municipal contribution for our budget for 2023. The first is an increase of 3.2% to assist the library in meeting inflationary and a collective agreement requirements. The second request is a request for $1 per citizen in order to start to align our funding with our peer libraries as we have fallen behind. Other highlights for next year, as Ken's already mentioned, is the expansion of our fine-free initiative to all residents of St. Catharines. Fines really do present a barrier to some people using the libraries, and that's why we want to move forward on this. Our salary and benefits numbers do reflect the Monday openings as well as the standardized hours. We continue to fine-tune our collection purchases to make sure that we're purchasing the materials that the residents of St. Catharines really want to use. Our occupancy and supplies budgets have been impacted by inflation, but they do reflect an enhancement of hours at our Port Branch, as well as some software to enhance programs and communications for the library to make access easier again. Thank you, and I'll be turning it back over now.
Can we have the next slide, please? And the next one. Thank you, Karen. We're excited about our plans for the central renovation. It's a 65,000 square feet building that's been quite well maintained. And as mentioned, we've had significant projects funded by the library over the last 3 years. But the nature of libraries has changed, and so this space must also change. Downtown is transforming, and so the central branch needs to transform as well to meet the standards the residents of St. Catharines deserve. This project is expected to take 3 years and cost $15 million. Next slide. We're showing you a couple of the architectural drawings. These first two slides show a much more welcoming entrances of the library from two angles. So this is one, and can I have the next slide, please? And this is the other. And you'll see there's a lot more natural light also coming in through the entrances. And the next slide, please. In the interior, we're looking at more open space, more light, and a much more flexible space to allow us, as Ken said, to do programs and other initiatives. The next slide, please. And so as we in library land are taught to say, what are your questions?
All right, thank you for the presentation. If any councillors have questions or comments, they can raise their hand either on Zoom or in the chamber. I will go with Councillor Williamson, followed by Councillor Miller, and then Councillor Kushner. Councillor Williamson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor Cisco. Congratulations on your first meeting. In terms, and I'm not sure who would like to answer this from the library, but you mentioned that we've had 3 major capital expenditures in just the past number of years: the roof, the HVAC system, and the elevator dumbwaiter. And these have been self-financed by the library itself. I just wonder, particularly for the benefit of the new councillors, could explain how the ownership arrangement works with the building and who's responsible for carrying out different projects, or at least how it's been done in the past.
Yeah, do you want me to address that, Ken?
Yeah, you can go ahead. Thanks, Karen.
So the Central Library is actually owned by the City of St. Catharines, and we rent it from the city at $1 a year, I believe is the rate. So a nominal rent. I will tell you that we are in the process of securing a new lease with the city for the space, and a service level agreement. The current lease has expired. So the library is responsible for the general repairs and maintenance of the building, and that's why we have undertaken those significant capital expenditures over the last few years: the elevator, dumbwaiter, roof, and HVAC. We have funded those from our reserves, but those reserves are not endless, and they are getting substantially used this year, especially because of the HVAC project.
Thank you very much. And then we're looking at a very ambitious and, well, I hate to use the word exciting again, but it is exciting, a major renovation and transformation of the downtown branch. And it's going to be in 3 phases, I understand. Are you going to be looking to the city for assistance with this major capital expense or series of capital expenditures?
Yes, so I will try to answer. So Mr. Mayor Cisco, so through to Councillor. So I'll try to answer this question. So yes, as our board chair Janice mentioned earlier, so this building was built in 1976, and it has been 46 years. It has been quite well maintained, but it's right now is the building itself, like for instance, like accessibility and the flexibility of the space and things like that, really needs to be updated. So what the library has done with the architect firm is we are looking at ways to improve accessibility. And one example I can say is right now the library only has 1 elevator, and when that elevator goes down, and the people cannot get up to the up floors. And so we are thinking of adding a 2nd elevator. And then the entranceway right now is like you use a push button, and we have actually received complaints from the public. Sometimes it's very hard to push the push button to open the door. So we are thinking of the entrance. We try to use automatic sliding doors. So, when people approach and the door automatically opens. And then, some councillors probably are aware of that Church Street walkway. That is the area the library is thinking of. If we do go down that path to renovate the central library, we will try to enclose that area, make it become an interior space. So in terms of the project, we are thinking of at this point is a 3-year project, and we anticipate, the community would appreciate the library stays open while we renovate the space. So what we are thinking is we will renovate the central basement first. That's where the staff, they are currently located. So once we renovate the central basement, and we will relocate staff because we currently do have staff on the 3rd floor that is only for staff. And then we have staff also located on the 1st and 2nd floor. So we are thinking of trying to move staff to the basement as much as possible. Then we can free up the 3rd floor for the public use. Because, as we know, people can have bigger public space for different purposes, like doing research, maybe a quiet area, while at the same time, maybe there's a kids area, they can have different activities, story time, things like that. So we are thinking of the basement first, then the 1st floor, and then the 2nd, 3rd floor. So that's sort of like 3 phases. In terms of the cost, I think it's a big project. We are looking at $15 million at this point. We have been discussing with the city, trying to find fundings from upper level governments like federal or provincial. I know we have met with Richie, Christine, and city finance staff several times already. We are working on a federal grant that's for more kind of geared towards green energy, sustainability, kind of like inclusive building. I think it's more kind of improve accessibility and reducing carbon emission and things like that. But also we are exploring other funding opportunities. But at the end of the day, I personally would see this as a collaboration. Like we hopefully get money from the federal or provincial government, and the city is going to help us fund part of the project. And the library does also have some money in its reserve, and we can certainly contribute to that purpose.
Thank you. And for decades, the library was closed on Mondays, and in the recent years, you've managed to open it up to really improve accessibility and service delivery for the citizens of St. Catharines. And you've managed to do that. How much has that increased cost to the library? Has that been a significant change?
We haven't, I don't believe, because we started this year in May to open fully on Mondays. But we also tried to open Mondays throughout the pandemic, because I think we started in 2020. But at the time, we were kind of at reduced hours because of the provincial health mandate. So I don't believe, Karen, you can correct me if I'm wrong, I don't believe we asked for additional dollars for staffing. I think the library was able to move people around and try to find the internal efficiency. And so as I mentioned in my presentation, we added additional 32 hours per week throughout the system. So we increased from 167 pre-pandemic. Now we are sitting at 199 hours.
Thank you. Last question. One thing I did hear from some people when I was knocking on doors is that our salaries aren't as competitive. You talked about the funding levels in comparator municipalities, and that some people that have worked in St. Catharines have left to work in other municipalities because they're making more money there, when perhaps they would prefer to stay local. Has that been a bit of an issue for us?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, through you to Councillor. Yes, we do have that issue, and it has been increasingly difficult for us to recruit. And as Karen mentioned in her presentation, our funding level is lower than our neighboring municipalities. And I can give you one example. We recruited a staff member, I think was early this year or sometime last year, who only stayed with us for a couple of months and then went to Niagara Falls. That person was able to make, I think, extra $8 an hour doing the same work pretty much.
Thank you very much. And thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Williamson. I'll look to Councillor Miller, followed by Councillor Kushner. Councillor Miller.
Yeah, thanks, and thanks for the presentation. Just Councillor Williamson mentioned Mondays. So I think Sunday now is the only day the library's closed. I'm just wondering, do you at the library hear any feedback from residents about that? Is there any desire to be open 7 days a week?
Yes, so I will try to answer this question, Mr. Mayor, through to Councillor. So actually, the library started Sunday hours, I think, after Thanksgiving. So now we do open on Sundays at Dr. Huck. I think I believe from 1 to 1:30 to 5 every Sunday. Basically, our plan is to open Sundays to, I think, the week prior to Christmas, and then we reopen after New Year all the way to the end of April. Interestingly enough, Councillor Miller, you asked this question because the library actually recently did a library hour survey. We have collected feedback from the community, like comments, and in terms of our service hours. A lot of people that are quite happy about our hours, and especially I think now we open on Mondays, but there are people asking for more Sundays. So basically, it's because right now our funding can only allow us at this point to open on Sunday at Dr. Huck because it's slightly smaller. But we do want to open also at Central, and also, of course, kind of goes back to the recruitment, and we actually don't really have enough staff member even to open all Sundays. So I think that it's a sort of compounded issue. Is like, one is the number of people, and two is how to retain those people. But I do see the demand in the community, and we did hear from the public that they would like to see more hours, especially Sundays at different locations.
Okay, yeah, thanks for that. To me, it seems sort of intuitive that, especially as the library expands its services, that it would be open on weekends. I think Sundays are often a day where people are looking for something to do or somewhere to go. Can you, I guess I find it sort of concerning and alarming how much we're underfunding compared to our peers and even right next door in Niagara Falls, which is a much smaller municipality. Do you have an idea of what you would do if we were funding to that level to match sort of the standard across municipalities? Like with extra operating funding, what would our library system or library service look like?
Mr. Mayor, through you to Councillor. So I think that there are a couple things right off the top of my head. I think one is more service hours for sure. Because Councillor Miller, you asked Sundays, and I can tell you, like Niagara Falls, they have to be also open on like family days and Easter Monday. So because to me, I feel the same way. It's like family days, people are supposed to find some family activities and things like that, and we are actually closed. And historically, that's something we inherited. The library is still closed on Remembrance Day. I know City Hall actually opens on Remembrance Day, but we are closed on Remembrance Day. So I think that those are the things, like once we have that ability, and we should definitely will look into that to have more hours. And I think that the other thing is in terms of the service level, because right now is the number of staff, we are really kind of, I think, we kind of stretched pretty thin. In terms of the number of staff, St. Catharines, we have roughly, at this point, I would say about 63, maybe full-time equivalent. And in Niagara Falls, I think that they have well over 50 full-time equivalent. So when you look at the number of full-time equivalent per citizen, like our population is 135,000, and Niagara Falls is like 88,000. So they are like 2/3 of our population, but their staff, are like 25 or 20% higher in terms of the staffing level. So I think that certainly will help in terms of providing better service and then programs, doing more community outreach, school visits, things like that.
Okay, thank you for that. Another question, what's the relationship between the library and the St. Catharines Museum? Do you coordinate on any exhibitions, collections, maybe archives, anything like that? I'm just curious how much we're working together in these two departments that are often putting on things like exhibitions and showcases.
Mr. Mayor, through you, Councillor. So I actually was at the museum, I think, before summer. We had a meeting with them. We have an ongoing relationship with the museum. So a couple of things we do on an ongoing basis is one is we do host museum's collection in our online catalog. So basically, is when people try to look up museum items, they can go to library catalog and they can do a search, and then basically we'll tell them this item is located at the museum. And then other things like we do work on some digitization project, and then we actually recently, I think it was last month, actually we just recently had a joint program on local history research genealogy. So one workshop was held at the library, one workshop was held at the museum. So we do have that ongoing relationship. One thing actually was brought up in the past as a kind of possibility. I think when Mayor Sanzik was still on council, I think was kind of talked about the possibility to have some library collections at the museum, because I think the museum, the second floor, can potentially be used to provide some level of service.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, it seems like both are sort of cultural hubs in the city, and could generate interest, together to the people who are accessing those spaces, maybe through more advertising or portions of the exhibition of the museum at the library, and maybe vice versa. I know I'm taking up a lot of time, so I will two more questions very briefly, both concerning outdoor spaces. The first one, looking ahead at the renovation, is there thought to, a lot of libraries now are using rooftop spaces or balcony spaces or something like this to, add programming areas or cafes or whatever. What are we looking at outside the library with the renovation?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, through you to Councillor. Yes, in our sort of initial conceptual design, we do have two outdoor space sort of design for the second floor. So basically, one is facing James Street. I think that the other outdoor space is facing Carlisle. Okay,
that's great. Thank you for that. And just, there's been a lot of controversy around the barriers that go up outside the library. I'm just wondering if library staff or the board have insight or view as towards those barriers, and either the necessity or maybe lack thereof of the barriers.
Mr. Mayor, through you to Councillor. So I think that's one of the reasons why we are trying to redesign those entranceways. And so I think that will certainly help to address the issue or the concern you may have. And then I think another thing is by redesigning the central library, we actually also incorporated a concept is for library. Basically, library can be used after hours. So, if you have a chance to go onto the library website, actually the central Reno draft report is being posted there. So you can take a look. It's on the main floor. What we have is basically after hours, once the library is closed, we can still let the public to use, washroom or meeting spaces if there are any needs in the community. So those are the things we did take into consideration. And then, of course, with elevators and things like that, I think that was certainly addressed some issue.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Miller. Just for those new members of council, because I always like to point out when we do try to compare ourselves to our friends in Niagara Falls, something that's always important to keep in mind is the almost $25 million that they do receive from the provincial government for the hosting of casinos. So their revenue situation is a little bit different from ours, and I'd just like to make sure that we're all aware of that fact. I do have Councillor Kushner, followed by Councillor Ratzlaff.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The question I have is with respect to the comparators. The city provides the building to the library essentially gratis. Do the other municipalities and the comparators do the same thing?
And Mr. Mayor, through to Councillor. So I think that there are several different models out there. One is similar to ours. I know libraries out there, they get basically the building from the city, or they pay like $1 or minimum amount to use the facility. But there are, like, for instance, like Niagara Falls, they actually own their own building. And so they basically responsible for their building. I believe they also have to do renovations, whatever, things like that to their own, but they get the support from the city.
Thank you. My second question is, your plans, your capital expenditure plans are very ambitious. And tonight we have Rodman making a presentation to City Council. Was there any discussion on having your changes perhaps combined with what their future needs are?
Mr. Mayor, through to Councillor, no, we haven't had any discussion with Rodman about their future plan. What we have had with Rodman is to discuss possibilities to work together as partners in terms of displaying or showcasing their art pieces, or to hold programs together and to work together as a partner. That's something we have had discussions in the last number of years, but we haven't had any discussion on terms of their potential project related to our central library renovation.
Okay, would that be worthwhile? Are the two compatible in terms of cultural affairs?
Mr. Mayor, through to Councillor, I think at this point, I would say probably we need some discussion on that to see what kind of possibilities we have. I do understand there are other libraries, for instance, Cambridge. They do have what they call Cambridge Public Library and the Gallery. So they have sort of like not a shared building, but I think that they have both organizations kind of under one roof, and then it was managed by the same kind of management team. And I believe, I think there are a couple other municipalities, they have similar arrangement as, library and the gallery together.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kushner. Councillor Ratzlaff.
Thank you, Mayor. Through you, I just have a comment and two questions. So my first comment, looking at the renovation you're looking at doing, I really appreciate the aim to create a more flexible space. And like if you look at the renovation they did in Hamilton a few years back, it's really transformed the entire building, the entire space. So I've noticed that over the years you've increased services for kids, or like you've tried to improve the kids area, but it does seem like the building holds you back a bit. So I hope that the renovation will help with that. I'm sure it will. The other thing in Hamilton that the renovation had helped them do with the flexibility was it allowed them to provide space for social services. And so that also increased their capacity to provide a welcoming environment for everyone that might be using the library. And so I don't know if that's in the plans, but just the comment about looking to provide a more flexible space that can be used in different ways, that seems exciting to me. And I'm excited to see the progress. Two questions. So the one is about your capital reserves. It looks here, when I'm looking at the budget, 2023, it shows a balance of just over 2 million. But then when you're projecting 2028, 71,000. I'm just curious, where does those reserves come from? And are there plans to bring it back up to 2 million, or like how does that affect your long-term goals? How does that play a role in your long-term goals? And then the second question, I was at Pride in the Park this summer, and I was talking to staff at library staff at a pop-up at Pride in the Park, and it sounded like that was the first time you'd done that, and I thought it was really innovative because it's kind of taking the library to the people where they are. And I was curious how it went, and if you're planning on expanding it, or maybe it didn't go well and you're planning on pulling it back. But I was curious how that program went. So those are my two questions.
Carrie, you want to go ahead?
Thank through you, Mr. Mayor, to the council. I'll speak to the reserve question, and then Ken can speak more to the outreach piece that you also raised. In terms of the reserves, the reserves that we have had were accumulated over many years before myself or Ken got to the library. My understanding is that there had been a debenture on the Central Library. When that debenture was paid off, the council at the time and the city staff allowed us to put the same equivalent amount of money aside into our reserve. That has been and then if we did not spend our entire operating budget, it would also go there. Now we're finding that we have spent or will be spending a lot of our reserve funds to do these capital improvements that we've managed, and we really are stretched on our operating budget in terms of having anything left over to add to the reserves. What we have is a reserve policy that has been approved by a board of directors, and what it asks us to do is to set money aside in the reserves from our operating budget on an ongoing basis, and there's formulas for that. One is, I think, 0.25% of our insured value of our assets for our capital reserve. We're in a period right now where we haven't had the monies to be able to do that, but we have actually added that into, I think, 2025, 2026. We will hopefully be able to get some money freed up from our operating budget to supplement those reserves going forward. So that's how it's structured. It was created at probably 20 years ago, even more. But there is now a more strategic way of funding those on a systemic basis going forward.
Thanks, that's helpful.
Sorry. Thanks, Karen. Mr. Mayor, through you to Councillor. So in terms of outreach and things like that, the library actually started doing that in 2019. We did participate Friday in the Park before. I think maybe this time just after COVID, probably the first time we attended. And having said that, the library actually also received a grant from the government. I believe was last year, early last year or mid last year, for the Healthy Community Grant. That is sort of like, during COVID and a lot of people, they want to enjoy outdoor space and things like that. So actually library received, I believe was $25,000 or $30,000 from the federal government. And we actually built our own trailer. I don't know if you have seen it. We took it out several times in the summer. And so that is funded by the grant. And that is our plan going forward is, to have like maybe a canopy and maybe a trailer and some pavilion, whatever set up, go through, different parks or go to senior homes or places like that. And we can just do sort of like a mobile library concept. And that is certainly something we want to continue to do. And as I mentioned in my presentation, we rebranded our library, and so now we have new logo, new color scheme. And so I know Karen's been working hard trying to get contractors to put on our van and things like that. I think that will certainly raise the awareness of library in the community.
All right, thank you. Are there any other questions or comments from councillors? I'm not seeing any then. I will just finish with a few comments. I will say I've pushed previously in previous years with the library board around reserves, a number of other issues. I know Ms. Smith-Curtis has been here and has had to be a part of that, and I will simply say that I am very, very excited about this budget and everything that's there. I do appreciate, and I think I said this last year, but I appreciate the reserve policy. I think it's well thought out, and I think it's very appropriate for our budget. In understanding what the issues are that the library specifically would be facing this year, if anybody's purchased a book, they understand how the cost of books and the collection has gone up. Obviously, all of society is dealing with increases due to inflation, but at the same time, a 19% increase in service hours being accommodated within this budget is an excellent news story, I think, for the entire community. It's something that I've long thought I wished we could have, that increase in service hours. To see it here, I think, is fantastic. Councillor Williamson did a good job of providing kudos, but I'm going to echo his kudos to the library board and to staff at the library for making that happen, because ultimately, and we've all just gotten off the campaign trail, but ultimately, this is what residents always tell us. They don't have a problem paying their taxes, but they want to know that those taxes are going into good services, and the library is providing good service and providing enhanced service with this budget. So I will simply say, again, kudos. I'm very happy with this budget presentation, and I will be happy to move it along. So with that, can I have a mover to receive the presentation? Councillor McPherson. And can I have a seconder for this? I'll go with Councillor Miller. That the council receive the presentation from the St. Catharines Public Library regarding the library's proposed 2023 budget. All in favor? Anybody opposed? Seeing none, we'll say that's carried unanimously. And now a call for a motion to include the library's budget in the draft 2023 operating budget for consideration. I'll get a different mover for this one, Councillor Lindell, and a different seconder, Councillor Stevens, that the proposed 2023 budget presented by the St. Catharines Public Library be included in the draft 2023 operating budget for consideration. It went up on the screen after I started reading it, so that's why I didn't ask you to read it. But are there any debate? Is there any debate, any comments that anybody wants to make after the presentation? But before we pass this, looking at my Zoom screen, I'm not seeing any. All right, then I will look to the clerk to call the roll.
Councillor Lindell?
Yes.
Councillor Stevens?
Yes.
Councillor Williamson?
Yes.
Councillor Miller?
Yes.
Councillor Garcia?
Yes.
Councillor Kushner?
Yes.
Councillor McPherson?
Yes.
Councillor Ratzlaff?
Yes.
And Mayor Cisco.
Yes.
And that's carried.
Moving on to item 8.2, the FirstOntario Performing Arts Centre Orientation and 2023 Budget Presentation. I'll now call on Colleen Smith, the Executive Director, Carlos Raballo, the Director of Finance Administration, Mark Steinman, and Mario Didavides, the Chair of the Board of Directors, to present the FirstOntario Performing Arts Centre proposed 2023 budget. And I will turn it over to our presenters.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Mr. Mayor. Congratulations, by the way, to all councillors who are being re-elected and to the new ones. Congratulations. Looking forward to seeing all the great work you're going to do in our community. I'm Mario Didavides, and I'm the Chair of the Board for the FirstOntario Performing Arts Centre. As Mr. Mayor noted, I'm joined by Mark Steinman, our Chair of Audit, Colleen Smith, our CEO, and Carlos Raballo, our Director of Finance and Administration. We appreciate the opportunity today to present an overview of our Performing Arts Centre, some of our history and our current reality, and our 2023 budget request of just over $1.7 million. Together with the Meridian Centre and Brock University, Marilyn I. Walker School for the Performing Arts, the PAC was part of, as you know, a creative cluster master plan that was designed to revitalize the downtown and provide a home for local arts and truly put St. Catharines on the map in terms of the art scene across the province and hopefully across Canada. Thanks to some of the extraordinary community and partner support we've received, the capital build was highly successful. We opened our doors in 2015, and PAC operations were supported fundamentally through two agreements. The relationship agreement with the City of St. Catharines, I'm sure you're very familiar with, which details the purpose and the intention and the governance of the PAC, and an agreement with Brock University, which outlined the interconnected nature of the Marilyn I. School for Walker, in particular with the music program there, and with the Performing Arts Centre. I'd like to kind of turn it over now to our talented CEO, Colleen Smith, and she can walk you through the next few bits of our presentation tonight.
Thanks, Mario. I'm just wondering if we might be able to forward to the next slide, please. And the next one. Thank you very much. So the first 5 years of operations for the Performing Arts Centre were really highly successful, and they culminated in a really successful 2019 that saw over 1,000 events for the community. It saw dozens of flourishing partnerships and over $240,000 invested back into the community through skip funding that was collected through ticket surcharges. Just going to ask if we could go to the next slide as well, please. Yeah, so there are some of those stats. So the first 5 years also saw a combined, and this is a whopping $4.4 million invested back into artists, arts organizations, and touring groups that resulted in hundreds, if not thousands, of hot ticket performances, presentations, and partnerships. So this is really an average of $882,000 per year that the PAC invested directly in the creative community, both locally, provincially, and nationally. And in 2016, we opened our art house cinema, known as the Film House, which in its prime screened over 500 films in the year 2019. Next slide, please. In January of 2020, the PAC transitioned from being managed under the city entity to operating independently under the Municipal Service Board structure. So I was hired in May of 2020 as CEO. And while the oversight of the business is now under the purview of the board through myself, the asset remains under the ownership of the city. So what this means in terms of the transition in 2020 is that many of the services that the PAC had access to while under the city, such as finance, legal, HR, building services, and others, now are being transferred under the business operations of us as our own independent entity. And in saying this, I just wanted to note that the PAC has not yet had a full year of operations under this new structure without any shutdowns, modifications, restrictions, etc., because of the pandemic. So this, we've been waiting, essentially, and this budget represents what we hope will be the first full year of operation independently as a municipal service board. So now I'm going to introduce Mark Steinman, who is the chair of our Audit and Finance Committee, to speak to the next few slides. Mark, over to you.
Thank you, Colleen. So during the early days of pandemic closures, the team at the PAC worked to better articulate and refine our mandate. And the resulting mandate, which you see on the chart in front of you, focuses on three key pillars, consistent with our relationship agreement. One, actively investing in putting artists on stage. Two, providing a home for and supporting local artists and groups. And three, actively contributing to a vibrant, diverse, creative, and prosperous downtown. Next slide, please. So during the pandemic, the board approved a 3-year strategic recovery plan and its corresponding goals, objectives, and key performance indicators. This plan created a vision that will carry the PAC through until 2024 as we address the realities of the pandemic and its effect on our industry and community. That vision falls into 3 primary themes, as you see on the chart: recovery, discovery, and sustainability. Colleen?
Thank you. So on to the next slide, please. So this is a really interesting image that gives a snapshot of what's happened to the industry and where the PAC fits in. These are statistics that have been collected through an organization called Capicoa. They're a service organization that represents performing arts organizations and performing arts venues. And these stats are collected through StatsCan as well. So what you see here, the top line, which is the red line, is the impact on the real GDP for the Canadian economy. The line below that is culture. That also references or represents industries like TV and radio and broadcast and literary and distribution, etc. The line at the bottom is purely through the live performance domain. So this is where the PAC fits in. So you'll see the impact on real GDP for the live performance domain has been very substantially impacted by the pandemic due to closures and restrictions, etc. But the interesting thing too, though, is that when you see the increase that's happening towards Q4 2021, what we're seeing is that our sector's growth is also driven to a greater extent by an increase of the number of performances as opposed to an increase in the number of admissions or tickets sold. So according to information that's been collected by Capicoa, in July in particular, performing arts organizations were presenting more performances in addition to the rescheduled performances that we had to cancel due to the restrictions that happened early in January, February of this year. So at the same time, Capico is reporting that many of the member organizations like the PAC, we've been reporting that our audiences are on average around 20% lower than they were before the pandemic. And it's really a general consensus within the industry that we are on a 5-year recovery trajectory. So next slide, please. In 2020, the PAC worked in partnership with the GNCC to host a series of roundtable discussions with members of the arts and creative community regarding the impact of the pandemic restrictions and lockdowns on their businesses and the advocacy efforts that we required in coming out of this. And so these are still really the top concerns of the industry. The return of audiences, the return has been slow. Talent pipeline, and so this is really about our employees and the impact that we've had, in particular at the PAC with part-time staff, the managerial level, and also volunteers has been really astute. We also have increasing costs, inflation, insurance, audit fees, etc., and also a loss of revenue that we've seen because we just haven't been able to have performances. Next slide, please. It's important to note throughout the pandemic, with only just one exception, the PAC was not eligible for recovery funds like the emergency wage subsidy and loan programs due to our structure as a municipal service board, as opposed to other organizations that have nonprofit status or charitable status. So again, we're very early in our infancy since 2020 as this new entity, and we are in the process of applying to the CRA, just so that council is aware, so that we can then have charitable status, which will allow us eligibility for foundation grants and other applications that we are currently not eligible for. So most of the funds that we've received throughout the pandemic are really activity-based. So funds in order to produce a certain kind of event, as opposed to funds that help to make up for the revenue losses. And these are some really, really impactful statistics here. Between 2019 and 2021, the decrease in earned revenue for us has been 87.2%. At the worst of the pandemic, when we had to lay off staff because we didn't have wage subsidy available to us, we lost had to lay off 86% of our staffing complement in February of 2021. And when we look overall at the impact of the pandemic, we've lost about a third of our volunteer workforce. So it has been a tough time. Next slide, please. So despite, though, all of the setbacks that we've had, our team has consistently taken advantage of every opportunity to support artists and arts organizations. Between 2020 and 2022, we also provided over $80,000 in free space for local artists and arts companies presenting work or rehearsing at the PAC. And we continue to support these groups today through subsidized or discounted rental programs. Next slide, please. I love this slide. This is just 1 year and all of the partners that we've worked with in order to get work on stage, to get artists in front of audiences, and we continue to work with so many of these groups. Next slide, please, and turn it back over to Mark.
Thank you, Colleen. Through careful cost mitigation and the attention to business continuity, as you can see, the PAC in fiscal 2021 achieved a small surplus of around $176,000. These results enabled the PAC to make a contribution to the Sustainability Reserve. So all $175,000 went to increase the Sustainability Reserve to just over $275,000. This reserve is intended to provide for future financial stability for recovery efforts and/or to take advantage of extraordinary opportunities should they arise. The encumbrance reserve funds commitments that were not able to be completed during the year and therefore must be carried over to future fiscal periods. Next slide, please. So this is 2022 year to date. 2022 began with an announcement of unplanned closures that resulted in a net loss of $130,000 to the annual operating budget. But despite this loss and subsequent resource challenges that Colleen has commented on, the team has worked diligently to deliver a new 2022-2023 hot ticket season, a fully realized celebration of nations, and a summer's worth of free programming and outdoor film screenings. Our latest forecast for the current fiscal year is now closing the gap on these January losses, and we are cautiously predicting a close to break-even year and possibly even a small surplus. Colleen?
Thanks, Mark. Next slide, please. Now, what you see before you is the board-approved 2023 budget with a request to the city for a little over 1.7 million. Again, since the PAC transferred from the city to the board, we have not been able to realize a full year of operations because of the closures. So this budget represents what we anticipate is going to be that first full year since 2019. And what this budget sees is a full year of spring programming under the hot ticket season, a very full fall season as well, year-round screenings in the film house, and really robust activity from a lot of our partners like the NSO, Chorus Niagara, Bravo Niagara, and many more. As our business plan details, we approach the season similar to the design of 2019 with some flexibility. It does bear stating that because of timing for approval and submissions for this particular process, that this budget was created in the summer of 22. So prior to going into the fall and seeing how the consumer confidence issue is really playing out. And as you may know now, our earned revenue results this fall are showing a softer public response to public events. Our revenue targets are around 20 to 25% behind the goal, but that's pretty much consistent with a lot of other organizations like ourselves throughout the province. And so we just wanted to highlight the precarious nature of the 2023 assumptions. And if you go to the next page, next slide, please, these are some of the assumptions that we do have. So these are inherent within the 2023 budget. Again, critical to our long-term success is getting this first year fully under our belt without any restrictions. So despite the optimism of our revenue targets, the team are still committed to managing the year to balance revenue maximization with cost mitigation, pending the early 2023 indicators. This team has worked so hard to keep us above the line over the last 2 years, and we are certainly committed to doing that again. Next slide, please. The recovery outlook for the live performance domain really does span a 5-year horizon. And as the PAC navigates around challenges like consumer confidence, inflation, talent shortages, we also appreciate the opportunities that we have in front of us. We have strong partnerships like the one we have with Brock University, other community partners, and a really great relationship with the city and with city staff. That means that we support each other by the PAC providing programming that's really robust in content, all the events and activities that continue to draw people to the downtown core and create economic spin-offs. And as well, efforts towards establishing a robust fundraising program at the PAC have started over the last couple of years, and we're really encouraged by the growth that we're seeing year over year. And this kind of fundraising activity really goes to support a lot of the community efforts that we do free of charge or at very low access points in terms of pricing. Next slide, please. The road to pandemic recovery for the PAC is really just beginning. And we do acknowledge that our 2023 request for investment from the city is higher than in the past years. At the same time, the percentage of the investment according to our budget remains pretty much the same from 2022 to 2023, although the dollar amount is higher. We thank you very much for your consideration of support for this. The history of the Performing Arts Center for St. Catharines, it proves that this company has always been able to multiply the impact of investment through the creation of events, through the creation of jobs, through an investment in artists, and even in feeding resources back to the city like the SKIP program does. So in a very uncertain environment, we believe that we do have a strong plan. We have a really strong board, and we have a fantastic team. And we really want nothing more than to finally launch into our first full season together with your help. So thank you very much for your time and your consideration today.
All right, thank you very much for the presentation. Looking to councillors for questions. I have Councillor Garcia on the screen, Councillor McPherson. So we'll start with Councillor Garcia.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, I wanted to, first of all, thank Colleen, Mark, and Mario for that presentation. I must say, having the honor and pleasure to sit on the board of the PAC as a representative of City Council, I have witnessed firsthand the hard work that goes into something like this budget and the hard work that goes into keeping the place going through the most difficult circumstances. And I think Colleen has done a wonderful job of explaining the challenges that they've gone through. They have an amazing staff team, and she's already mentioned that, but I wanted to reiterate it. I just wanted to mention and ask a couple of questions, particularly for the benefit of new councillors, I think. Colleen, could you share with us, based on your experience at not only here but other major venues, how do you feel about the quality of the building and the facilities and the venues that we have to offer at the Performing Arts Center?
Thank you, Councillor Garcia, and through the chair. I also wanted to mention, some of you might be aware, Jack Diamond recently passed away. Jack Diamond is one of the founders and principals of Diamond Schmidt Architects, who are known globally for their work with performing arts centers, and were the architects on record for the Performing Arts Center. So the fact that you have a Diamond Schmidt building here in your city should just alone be a great source of pride. I worked all across the country, and I came here because of a couple of reasons. I love the area. I do. The work that the PAC is doing, really, it hits above its weight in terms of other performing arts centers across the country. And that's both in the volume of activity and in my opinion, the quality of the activity. We also have a really interesting relationship with Brock University, and we're just beginning to tap into that to its fullest extent now by looking at programmatic relationships that I hope will really evolve over time. So it really is a very unique center, and there's so much promise. And we just, like I said in my presentation, we just really need the opportunity to get going.
Thank you for that, Colleen. And I think what you're saying shows, I must say that Mr. Mayor and Council, I hear comments from residents from all across Niagara all the time about attending the Performing Arts Center, and people that come from other municipalities that view St. Catharines as the center of the arts of the region, largely because of the PAC and all of the arts organizations that we have that participate there and across the city. I just wanted to ask one more question of Colleen for the benefit of council again. You mentioned the staff that have been lost because of the pandemic and the volunteers, but could you also comment on the fact that you have managed to achieve the results that you're achieving in 2022, despite the fact that you have been severely understaffed?
Thanks, through the chair. We had a Finance and Audit Committee meeting today, and while we are predicting that we will have a break-even or a small surplus at the end of the current fiscal, it really is on the backs of the people who are working here. So there has been approximately $85,000 this current fiscal year. That is, and I don't like using the word savings, but we are not spending it because we do not have people in those jobs. So we have part-time positions that are being filled by full-time employees. We have manager positions that are being covered by directors who are also doing their jobs as directors. And I know this is not sustainable, but this is the situation that we are in currently and what we're working through. So it's another nod to the wonderful team that we have here and the hard work that they're doing as we recover and move out of this pandemic state.
Sorry, thank you for that. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. And I think there are a number of business owners in St. Catharines who can probably very much sympathize with the issues around finding people to work in their businesses. Councillor McPherson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First, I just want to say thank you to Colleen and everyone at the PAC. This summer's concert series downtown was absolutely astoundingly fun and hopefully will happen again, or in some capacity will happen again. I guess the question I have, Colleen, you and I got to attend the chamber event with Bruce McDonald from Imagine Canada, and he talked about the kind of the changing face of philanthropy and how it is kind of changing. The only question I have is really, are you concerned or are you looking at approaching donations in a different way and as well volunteers? Because I know that's another struggle.
Yeah, thanks. Through the chair, thank you very much, Councillor McPherson. The first question you have around fundraising is a long game. It's about developing relationships with people so that A, they believe in what you're doing, and B, they trust you. Like, they trust you as people who represent your organization. And so we're really at the very beginning of our fundraising journey, but we are starting, and we have great programs. Celebration of Nations is almost entirely free with the exception of the evening programs on the Saturday. So we have great programming that really speaks to the needs of the community. We have educational programs where we offer tickets to kids for $10, or we have an impact program that allows schools or students that need to come and experience shows for free. We also do free community programming like we did in the summer. So we know that we have the content that is charitable in intent, and it's just a matter of developing relationships with the right people in our community who really want to stand behind what we're doing. And on the volunteer front, again, it's a long game. We had a fantastic amount of volunteers when the center first opened. And a lot of them were senior in nature. And when the pandemic happened, they just weren't comfortable, being in these places again. So we are working on developing that volunteer.
It just froze.
The joys of the internet.
Yeah, no, she just froze.
And it looks like she's mightily struggling to rejoin the Zoom call.
Jeez.
All right.
Last man standing.
Yeah, I was going to say. So, Councillor McPherson, you got what you were hoping for? There we go. Excellent. Are there any other, although we are quickly running out of people to answer questions, are there any other questions from members of council? All right. I'm not seeing any more questions. Mr. Steinman, you are the last one left, I guess, to thank, but along with Ms. Smith and Mr. DeVitas, sincerely appreciate it. And I will make the comment that I was going to make when everybody else was here, simply that of all the organizations that needed to get through the last couple of years, I think the FirstOntario Performing Arts Centre has done a fantastic job, given just how hard it was for the performing arts industry to be able to open the doors and actually have events. So kudos to everybody who is involved with the FOPAC over the last 2 years and getting us to this point where recovery is possible, and I think where the community is excited for what that recovery is going to look like. On behalf of
I'll pass that on.
Excellent. Sincerely appreciate it. And before we go any farther, I did want to just very quickly thank Councillor Garcia, and I believe Councillor Townsend from the last term of council who sat on the FOPAC board for their work. And because I'm thanking them, I'm also going to step back one presentation and thank Councillor Williamson and Councillor Littleton from the last term for their work with the library board, because I think it's important to acknowledge the many hours that get put on with the agency's boards and commissions, and I sometimes think we forget to thank our council colleagues for that time as well. With that, can I have a motion to receive the presentation? I'm going to say Councillor Stevens. Actually, no, I'll go with Councillor Garcia and Councillor Stevens to second. And that will be the council receives the presentation from the First Ontario Performing Arts Centre regarding their proposed budget. All those in favor? Anyone opposed? Seeing none, then that is carried unanimously. And now I'll look for a motion to include the Performing Arts Centre budget in the draft 2023 operating budget for consideration. And I'm going to go back to Councillor Garcia for that one, and a seconder, Councillor Kushner. And Councillor Garcia, if you'd like to read the motion as it stands there on the screen.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, that the proposed 2023 budget presented by the First Ontario Performing Arts Centre be included in the draft 2023 operating budget for consideration.
Thank you, Councillor. Is there anybody who'd like to speak to that? We've all made our comments, but... All right, seeing none, then I will look to the clerk to call the roll.
Councillor Garcia?
Yes.
Councillor Kushner?
Yes.
Councillor McPherson?
Yes.
Councillor Ratzlaff?
Yes.
Councillor Williamson?
Yes.
Councillor Stevens?
Yes.
Councillor Miller?
Yes.
Councillor Lindell?
Yes.
And Mayor Cisco?
Yes.
And that's carried.
All right, moving on to item 8.3, the Meridian Centre Orientation and 2023 Budget Presentation. I'll now call on Jeff Dixon, the General Manager of the Meridian Centre, to present the Meridian Centre's proposed 2023 budget. Mr. Dixon.
Thank you, Mayor Cisco and Council. Congratulations to everyone, and looking forward to working with everyone. I believe that's the wrong presentation. There's a deck that should be up to just a PowerPoint presentation, potentially. There we go. Thank you very much. Next slide, please. Just want to introduce myself. My name is Jeff Dixon. I am the General Manager of the Meridian Centre and work for a third-party management company called ASM Global that I'll get to a little bit. If we can get the next slide, please. Just want to start off with our mission statement that we have internally. So the Meridian Centre's mission statement is to provide diverse entertainment and live events to the Niagara region. Our team holds a deep sense of pride in the venue and strives daily to make us the premier source for entertainment locally. With a loyal commitment to enhance the quality of life in the region and drive economic growth to the downtown, we provide a facility that is safe, versatile, and dynamic, where we create memorable experiences for our guests and exciting opportunities for our team, all while delivering the highest value to our community partners and the city of St. Catharines. That's really the statement that we kind of live by and we go back to on a regular basis internally to make sure that we are striving to hit our goals locally. Next slide, please. A little history on your Meridian Centre. It opened, in October of 2014. We're a 5,300 seat hockey arena, home of your Niagara Ice Dogs and your Niagara River Lions. The live sporting events delivered by our primary tenants, the Niagara Ice Dogs, and our summer tenants, the Niagara River Lions, offer a consistent calendar of events, but it has been ASM Global's goal to deliver and layer in additional events, both big and small. Since we've opened this venue, we've been able to attract concerts like Elton John and the Arkells, family events such as the Harlem Globetrotters or Cirque du Soleil, as well as blockbuster style events such as the Under-18 Women's World Hockey Championships and the Scotties Tournament of Hearts. Next slide, please. Because of the live experiences, the Meridian Center has welcomed over 1.6 million guests through our venue. Next slide, please. Over the 8 years that we've been there, the 1.6 million guests that have graced us at the Meridian Center has passed through the downtown core to get into our venue. They've had to park their cars or take taxis. They've visited restaurants and shops, bars, and even vendors. From youth or adult recreation, hockey, to Ice Dogs home games, to blockbuster multi-day events, the Meridian Center has played its part in driving visitors to the downtown core. Next event, please. Over the year, the Meridian Center has been able to secure our fair share of live events. Promoters and clients love the Meridian Center. They love dealing with the great venue and the style that it's been built as. They love our dedicated staff and appreciate our performance and quality of service. And the most important thing is that they appreciate our community. Our community has been buying tickets to their shows, making multiple sellouts a regular occurrence in our venue. Next slide, please. The global pandemic was devastating to the live events. We heard our friends at the Performing Arts Center how it was impacted the industry, and they showed some amazing slides that really hit home. In 2020 and 2021, health restrictions made it almost impossible to host live events of significance that would through the Meridian Center. Though our 2022 calendar has been one of our busiest, the venue has seen, due to the backlog of concerts and events, we're very cautious as we enter into 2023 calendar year. The demand for live events is strong. Trends are showing that artists and events want to get out on the road. They want to tour again, but the uncertainty of these current economic conditions has started to slow down some of this development. Next slide, please. Tell you a little bit about us as ASM Global. We fortunately have the strong support of ASM Global to help us navigate the industry and these uncertainties in the next few years. ASM Global, we are the world's leader in venue management and the producer of live event experiences. ASM Global manages over 350 venues worldwide, everything from small theaters to arenas like ours to major stadiums and event centers throughout. Across the globe. No one else offers the benefits or the global scale in best-in-class local operation execution to create value and drive profitability. So we're able to, look for the events and so on, while also using our scale and reach to make sure that we keep our costs in line as we move forward. Next slide, please. Looking at 2022, the year really did start off with some restrictions. We had a number of events where we weren't able to allow any fans into the building. We had multiple events where there was reduced capacity. We had commitments, obviously, to our tenants to perform these events. We couldn't cancel them. So there was still a cost and expense to us based on contracted terms. We weren't able to have any concerts or events during January or February, and this really impacted us. Live events came back in March of 2022, and they haven't stopped since. We've been able to host 10 concerts. We did a run for Cirque du Soleil of 8 shows. The River Lions and Ice Dogs were able to complete their seasons, and we've been ongoing. One of the major components, which I know that a number of you were able to visit us, was with the Canada Summer Games, which we were able to host the opening ceremonies as well as the basketball competition. Next slide, please. As we look forward to our 2023 operating budget, these are some of the assumptions that we've taken that will guide us along as we go. We believe that the Ice Dogs will return to their historical attendance. They've been one of the strongest in the OHL to attract fans to their game. We believe that our calendar of concerts and events will be moderate. We're not being too slow. We believe that the first quarter might be a little soft, but then that will return as the year goes on. The River Lions will continue growing as they go along. We don't have a major multi-day event such as the Canada Games or the Scotties Tournament of Hearts. This is a really, this does impact our budget. We've seen from year over year that when we do have these types of events, it really affects us positively as it generates, not just additional revenue for the building, but also for the community. One of the big challenges, and you've heard this time and time again, is attracting and retaining talent, management, supervisor, and part-time staff. It continues to be a challenge. The building is going on 8. The building does concerts and events. People are hard on the building, so it is aging as we go along. It is holding up well, but it does start to show its age in some of the areas. And of course, economic uncertainty and inflation is something that we are concerned about. Next slide, please. Our request this year to council is a request for $767,000 and change. This is less than we requested in the past in 2022 by about 12%. Some of the highlights and so on that I want to touch on is that we are predicting or forecasting that our revenues will be approximately the same, though we do see that there is a significant decrease in the number of events. The type of events that we're forecasting will see some significant revenues to it, as well as we do have some concepts that we are working on that we're seeing to develop some increase in food and beverage opportunities, some VIP opportunities, and corporate additional revenue opportunities that we're working on in terms of events. We do have a new ticketing agreement through our parent company, ASM Global, that our deal that we do see a larger share of ticket fees coming to the venue, which helps offset some of the costs that we have. We do see that there is a wage increase that's going across. As directed, we are looking to become part of the living wage status that we have to target by the end of December 2024. This is impacting some of our net revenues, but also impacting our wage line. And then we just see increased operating expenses as we go along. Next slide, please. I'm also going to touch a little bit on our capital requests this year that will be in the capital budget. So our capital requests, we do have a 30-year capital improvement plan that we developed approximately more than 5 years ago now. It's updated on a regular basis, actually going through that process right now, that we do a rolling cycle for that. But as we know, sometimes we have to look internally and see what is in front of us. We always take health and safety as our first priority when we're looking at our capital budget requests. Next is our end of life for equipment, obviously, and systems. And then if there's anything that we can do that can potentially save us some money or increase our revenues, and then obviously our preventative maintenance. Next slide, please. Our requests this year, and yes, because everybody keeps pointing out to me, the amounts for the POS system and the Daktronic system, they did come in at the same price. That's not an error, but it's a modest request that we are we have some end-of-life equipment throughout, and then some health and safety that we are concerned about, as well as we believe we can increase some guest service and some revenue generation with some modest increase in capital to some cooking equipment. Next slide, please. We always do look at our challenges and opportunities. The ongoing trend is the challenge of labor. We do see ticket sales trends. Colleen and the PAC, they've seen a decrease in their attendance. We've been fortunate in 2022 that the talent that we have seen a steady number in our concerts and events. We have seen a decrease in our tenants, the Ice Dogs, but the balance seems to be okay. We are seeing more of a last minute pickup than we ever have in the before. I mentioned the aging building and then the increase of cost of materials. We do see opportunities, though. The opportunities and really what ASM Global as a company is really focusing on is that high margin business. You know, where can we make additional money on food and beverage? What are the VIP experiences and signature experiences? That's what the building has been focusing on to make sure that we can offer those benefits to the customers as we go along. You know, as we continue to cultivate those alternative revenue streams, you know, building on the success, what COVID brought us was we had to pivot and find other things to do. We're actually building on the successes that we found that we survived on during COVID time periods, and some corporate events, commercials, trade shows, and then we've now maximized our ice rentals to the community. And we run around a 95% usage rate for our community availability. And then lastly is the shared service model with Canada Games Park. We are also the third-party management company for Canada Games Park, which once their budget is approved, I will be coming back to do a presentation on that. But we have been able to see some savings on through those two entities coming together. So that is the end of my presentation, and happy to answer any and all questions.
All right, thank you, Mr. Dixon. I have Councillor Williamson followed by Councillor Garcia on my list as of right now. So Councillor Williamson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through to Mr. Dixon. You mentioned about the community ice rentals being at 95%. That's good to hear. I know that your ice rental cost is at premium compared to the city. How many hours now are you able to rent, make available to the community, and has that increased over the years?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to the councillor. Yes, Councillor Williams, what we've done is we've actually maximized and worked with the user to have them understand that they do get moved around for if we have another event. So we've been able to increase, you know, adult rec league programming. We've been able to take on some university program. It seems to be more adult based because they're willing to pay the higher premium rates in the building, as well as they're willing to take on those later hours. So yes, so we have been able to maximize all of our space by not holding back. Anything where we were a little cautious before, we are no longer that way at all.
That's good to hear. Like, and roughly how many hours would that be in a typical week? As I guess, like you said, it changes, I'm sure, with the ice dogs.
Yeah, I don't have the exact hour on top of my head, but we do like basically Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, without any events in the building. It is basically every single day from 5 o'clock to midnight. So Monday through Friday. And then we see on Saturday and Sundays, we go from 8 o'clock in the morning. The junior ice dogs start on 8 o'clock in the morning on Saturdays, as well as Sundays, all the way through Sunday night. We go to 11 o'clock. Saturdays a little bit earlier than that. And obviously people get bumped if there is an event in there. So we are maximizing every hour available to us. And we do offer youth a little bit of a discount compared to adult rentals.
Thank you. One other question is the OLG stage at Fallsview Casino, 5,000 seat theater. I didn't see that listed as a challenge, but I would assume it is going to be a challenge for us.
Yeah, I think so too. You know, and yeah, that my oversight for not having that, because I've had a lot of conversations about the OLG theater recently. It's programmed a little bit differently, and so they will attract some other talent. We primarily work with Live Nation, who is the primary promoter through this area. They typically would not go to that venue because they have their own promoting company, but they may be competing for the similar acts. So yes, I do believe that it may impact us. My conversations with Live Nation is neither of us are aware of what that may look like at this point in time.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Williamson. We'll look to Councillor Garcia.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Mr. Dixon, thank you for the presentation. I have a couple of budget questions, and I do understand that somewhat like the PAC, you have faced a very difficult environment because of the pandemic in terms of the business that you're in. Just wanted to understand the numbers in the slide on the operating budget. You said that that the loss that you are projecting is 12% lower, but in fact, when I look at the line above, which is net income from operations, the loss is significantly larger, but you show another line which is other income or expenses, which increases the loss in each year. And I'm just wondering what's included in that other income or expenses line.
Through you, Mayor Cisco. Yeah, great question. So that was the amount that was approved by council to host the summer games last. So the 236 would have been the summer games. 2 years before that, probably FIBA, I believe it would have been. And so those larger blockbuster style events are what end up in that line. You're accurate in saying that line above the net income from loss is larger for sure. It is $130,000 larger than the year before. Those basically are primarily from the increase of wages from year over year in terms to try to meet as we incrementally get to the living wage for some of our lower earners in our company. As well as just overhead costs, and the utilities make up a bit of a bump on that as well. So it's smaller buckets that have made up that $130,000 increase.
Thank you for that. So on a regular operations basis, the loss is larger, but the fact is that there was an increase in expenses in 2022 because of the Canada Summer Games, and then the other special events. That makes sense. And then on the capital budget, I was just wondering, when you said that that $500,000 is a modest request, but I don't think you show anywhere what the 2022 request was. I was just wondering, how does it compare?
Yeah, thank you very much. So I don't have that right in front of me, Councillor. I have to go back and get that for you and report through council. But the request has been, it was approximately, I believe, around 200,000 for lightings and board. It was actually about 250,000 for lighting and new glass was the request, and then which was approved. And then the year before there was approximately the same for sports lighting. And then there was not any capital requests made prior to that. So it's only been the last 2 years that there was capital requests made.
Okay, thank you. So the 500 is roughly double what you requested in 2022. Okay.
Correct. Yes.
All right. Okay. Thank you for that. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Garcia. Any other questions or comments? Councillor Stevens?
Yeah, I didn't realize that I might have a conflict with this one because I'm on the board of Crime Stoppers, and we benefit from charity events during Riverline games and Ice Dog games.
Okay.
So maybe.
Do you want to declare a conflict?
I think so.
Okay. So.
Okay.
We'll just ask you to fill out the appropriate form for that. All right, so Councillor Stevens has declared a conflict on this item. Are there any other questions or comments with respect to Meridian Centre budget presentation? All right, seeing none, thank you, Mr. Dixon. Many of my comments to the FOPAC, I will repeat to you. You had a difficult couple of years, so we appreciate all the work that's gone into continuing forward and bringing back some entertainment to the downtown. With that, do I have a mover for the presentation? Councillor McPherson. Can I have a seconder to move the presentation? Councillor Kushner. That council receives the presentation from the Meridian Centre regarding the proposed 2023 budget. All those in favor? Opposed? And that is carried. So now call for a motion to include the Meridian Centre's budget in the draft 2023 operating budget for consideration. I need a mover and a seconder. Councillor Miller will move the recommendation and Councillor Lindahl will second it. Councillor Miller, if you want to read the motion for me on the screen.
That the proposed 2023 budget presented by the Meridian Center be included in the draft 2023 operating budget for consideration.
I don't even know what to say to that. That was wonderful. If there's any debate, I'm not seeing any hands, then I'll look to the clerk to call the roll.
Councillor Miller?
Yes.
Councillor McPherson?
Yes.
Councillor Lindahl?
Yes.
Councillor Kushner?
Yes.
Councillor Garcia?
Yes.
Councillor Ratzlaff?
Yes.
Councillor Williamson?
Yes.
And Mayor Cisco.
Yes.
And that's carried.
All right, so moving on to our final item on the discussion agenda, item 8.4, Community Recreation and Culture Services, an update from the Rodman Hall Art Institute of Niagara. And I will call upon Jean Bridge, the board chair of the Rodman Art Institute of Niagara, to present the update from Rodman Hall Art Institute of Niagara.
Thank you, Mayor. It's really nice to see you all again, even if remotely. I am representing my colleagues at, let's just say RAIN for now. We keep going back and forth. I want to indicate, yes, that I am the chair of the board. And the nature of our presentation tonight is a little different because we're updating you on the results of the funding you gave us in 2022 and reporting out our deliverables. So next slide. We are indeed grateful for this early stage actual startup funding that is based in large part on a business plan that is in place and constantly being updated, but that forms the basis of our request and our plans. And what we're doing is focused on caring for the collection, taking a systematic approach to reinventing a new and vibrant, sustainable art gallery, and working with collaborators to present the collection in new ways. The truth is we are still and will be for some time a gallery without walls. Next slide. So the real core of the work we've been doing in 2022 is the community consultations and a preliminary environmental scan. The consultations enabled us to receive input from 244 people who are community and civic leaders and members of cultural and leaders of cultural organizations. The preliminary environmental scan looks at the arts infrastructure for the region in museums and arts organizations and looks at how RAIN fits into that ecosystem. So what we've learned overall is that there is a strong desire for a new public art gallery that's robust and is a platform for the collection. The collection is the core of what we're doing. We've learned that the institutions that serve the visual arts in our area are scattered, they're small scale, they're often multi-purpose, and there's only one visual arts institution in the region that's capable of presenting Canadian cultural property, that is, works that have special certification and tax status. 20% of Rodman's collection falls into that category. We also find that there's a really strong desire in the community for art education. Key to what we've been doing then are the recommendations of Lord Cultural Resources, who guided the work on the community consultations. And Lord has recommended a kind of vision. It really constitutes an early strategic vision for the gallery. And this is for a multi-platform public art gallery that serves the region and is broadly funded. The concept is for a public art gallery in St. Catharines with satellite presence across the region. perhaps through existing cultural spaces. Lords also recommended that what we do be integrated in the existing cultural ecosystem, and that it ensures access to the collection as soon as possible. And then there was a strong recommendation that we engage youth now. So this is a vision that can and should be tested in a future feasibility study that would inform an approach to a future site and a capital project. Such feasibility studies can be funded through the federal government. I'll talk a little more about that in a moment. But in the meantime, we've also been working to leverage the collection and actively working to get the collection seen in the community, so visible to our constituents. So through our website, through virtual exhibition we held, and an exhibition at Richard Pierpoint Park, and of course the relocation of the downtown sculptures, which is scheduled for the early spring. We're also working on new programming so that we can continue to remain relevant, and we have an application ready for the Ontario Arts Council for an ambitious exhibition that they would in part or in large part fund. We're also looking at funds for innovative uses of the collection from special portions of the Canada Council as one source of that. We held a all funders meeting with all levels of potential government funding, right from the Ministry of Canadian Heritage to the to Canada Council, Ontario Arts Council, the Trillium Foundation, region, and the city, so that we could share with all potential funders our current status and look to their advice and have all the potential funders know what other funders are recommending. We're also trying to engage collaborations wherever possible. I was glad that the library acknowledged our outreach to them, and I know Colleen would too. We are particularly interested in art education and developing collaborations for that, perhaps with the city. And we're considering new ways to promote regional artists. So options always exist for temporary locations or pop-up locations. You know, that's the nature of collaboration. But the sooner we get even a temporary location, the better off we'll be. So next slide. Oh, I should have queued that up. You can go on to the next one. So next steps for 2023 are no-brainer, the feasibility study to test the emerging vision and to evaluate what is successful elsewhere so we can learn from what others do. And we also want to test, confirm, and recommend viable approaches to the new gallery within that context of a feasibility study. As I mentioned, the Ministry of Canadian Heritage typically funds these kind of studies through the Cultural Spaces Fund, and that would reduce the burden significantly on the city. They'll ask us to fund the feasibility study in part, but they will fund a large portion of it. At the same time, we'll be developing collaborations, and that's going to become more and more critical, especially as we look at something that works across the region with existing galleries and museums and cultural organizations. And of course, we're continuing efforts to secure funding from all levels of government. I mentioned the all funders meeting and the approaches we're taking to following up on recommendations there. So we have several applications in process right now. So I think the last slide is a thank you and some contact information. I invite questions because I'm sure you have quite a few.
Excellent. Thank you for the presentation. And do we have any questions or comments from council? All right. I'm not seeing any.
Sorry.
Well, Councillor Kushner, there we go.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. The question I have is, do you have any preliminary costs or range of what a new facility would look like?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Kushner, to be honest, we do not. We know what the range would be. I would say minimum $15 to $20 million. A lot depends on the scope and scale of what we want to produce, how we can enjoy. You mentioned the library earlier, how we might enjoy certain synergies and co-location options. The truth is, public art gallery to house the collection and be able to produce the kinds of curated, impactful exhibitions we have in mind. I think Rodman Hall was 12,000 square feet, and I think we would need, especially so that we could generate income, we would need in the area of 15 to 20,000 square feet. We have talked to other public art galleries about how they sustain themselves and what scale and scope. But I think the feasibility study we're talking about will help to define that for us. So it's a little soon to jump into permanent space or even imagine what that might be until we have this feasibility study. And as I mentioned, cultural spaces, or the Ministry of Canadian Culture, has a whole process that they use to assist fledgling organizations like ourselves and new museums like this to plan. And so they will assist us in many, many ways. And then they want to ensure that what we're doing is sound, sustainable, and viable. And so they're willing to support and pay for a lot of the studies that will ensure that that's the case. So I can't say we know precisely what we're in for, but I would say, we shouldn't fail to be ambitious, because this will be our legacy for a long time.
Right. And one of the reasons I ask, I don't know if you're aware, but Rodman Hall has been put up for sale recently.
Yes, I am.
At less than 10 million. But,
yes, I am.
I gather from what you said is that site would not be suitable.
That's not the case. We don't close the door on that. It is already fitted out as a boutique hotel. Right. So big, and a banquet center. So a great deal of money has been spent, I'd say in excess of $2 million to transform it into a new use. But that doesn't mean that a new building couldn't be erected on the site or expand upon the modern wing of the gallery. There could be excellent synergies between a boutique hotel, banquet center, and a public art gallery. The question we've always asked, and we've asked since, we sought a transition with Brock back in 2017, 2018, is that the best possible site for the city, for a public art gallery, is at the most accessible site. So that kind of evaluation, once we know what kind of gallery we want, what scope and scale, then we look to see if there are sites that would serve our purposes, some better than others.
And the reason I refer to it is recently we went through an experience with Glenwood School.
Yes.
And the board put the school up for sale. And after a lot of consultation with various groups and with the area residents, the city decided to buy the property. They severed half for a neighborhood park, and then the building itself was repurposed, and as well town housing was put in around the perimeter, and it worked out very well financially and for the community. And I'm just thinking if the same approach could be taken to Rodman Hall.
Absolutely. And, if you look at the feasibility study that was carried out in 2018 on Rodman Hall in order to try to entice Brock and the city to entertain a transfer to our organization, that was the vision, was that there could be multiple uses there, and that with a carefully planned site, we could use that land more effectively for, as we said at the time, an ensemble of civic assets. We are in constant touch with Nino Donatelli and have a very good relationship with him. He's been eager to realize his plans. And so what he's done has been done, on his own initiative. So there hasn't been any real opportunity to coordinate.
Yeah. Okay, thank you very much, and the best of luck in your endeavors.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Councillor Kushner. Councillor Miller.
Thank you, and thanks, Ms. Bridge, for the presentation. I'm just the new proposed model, or whatever it's going to become. Is the expectation that it would follow sort of the traditional funding model for art institutes and museums?
Yes, and having the scope extend into the region enables at the lower levels of funding more participation from municipal and regional municipalities. Typically, museums of this type, art museums of this type, are funded roughly a third each by federal, provincial governments, civic governments, and philanthropy. So we really are very aware that, unlike other organizations, we will be very dependent on philanthropy, on developing a donor base so that we can sustain ourselves. Brock has given us 2 endowments that were attached to Rodman Hall, and now they have come to us, and they will give us some small income. We estimate about $40,000 a year. That's a beginning. So we will be doing pursuing a donor base that will allow us to operate and allow us to carry out a capital project.
Okay, I appreciate that. And I realize this is maybe a little far down the road, but I did just happen to read about this. The problem was in American museums that are very dependent on philanthropy and the Board of Trustees, and often their donations are tied to acquiring specific pieces. And that's actually created a lot of the inequity in representation of artists in art museums, because a lot of people want to buy paintings that are famous, which tend to be by older white men, and we see a lack of representation from women and BIPOC people and Indigenous people. Is that a consideration we could make? I know we might have to rely on philanthropy, but is there some way to combat that sort of ingrained lack of representation?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Miller, that's a very insightful comment. And I think you'll see in the consultant's report on the community consultation that she recommends very strongly that we take steps to expand the collection and make it more meaningfully representative of our region, not just in terms of BIPOC representation, but in terms of the new Canadians and the changes that are happening in the demographics of our region. And I think that kind of need for diversity is evident in all that we do in our programming and in our board and in our volunteer base. This is a major goal and challenge for an organization like ours.
Okay, thanks, and I appreciate that. It is top of mind. The only other maybe note I will make, and this might not line up or have synergy, but the city might be in need of a new community facility, including something like an indoor pool and a library and things like this. So there might be an opportunity to add a museum to that potentially, but the timelines might not work up. But I would trust that our staff and you will work together if that is a possibility, for sure. And if that happens to be in Meridian, well, that's just great.
Thank you. Well, we're keeping our eyes and ears open, but as I think what's important is that we lay the foundation and groundwork, and not and be ready. That's why I think the city generosity in helping us with this startup funding is so important. It helps us be ready when opportunities to co-locate or to find synergies with particular developments. So we need to be ready and have a vision and know what kind of a gallery we want and how we anticipate sustaining it.
All right. Thank you, Councillor Miller. Any other questions or comments? All right. Thank you, Ms. Bridge, for your presentation. It's exciting to see this project continue to move along. Could I get a motion to receive the presentation? A mover and a seconder, Councillor McPherson, and a seconder, Councillor Miller. All those in favor? Opposed? And that's carried. And then we have a staff recommendation, which is going to go up on the screen momentarily. And can I get a mover of the staff recommendation? Councillor Williamson, wonderful. And a seconder, Councillor Garcia. Councillor Williamson, if you want to read that for me.
It's not visible on my screen right now.
Oh, okay. I can read it
Likewise.
for you. I can read it for you then, and hopefully we can get that put up there for you. The staff recommendations that the inclusion of the Year 2 funding of $100,000 to the Rodman Art Institute of Niagara in the draft 2023 operating budget for deliberation be approved, and that the Year 3 funding in 2024, a total of $125,000, be conditional on the confirmation of 2023 deliverables and the financial result of 2023 through a presentation to Council in Q4 of 2023. So again, that's moved by Councillor Williamson, seconded by Councillor Garcia. Are there any questions, comments, or debate? Seeing none, I'll look to the clerk to call the roll.
Councillor Williamson?
Yes.
Councillor Garcia?
Yes.
Councillor McPherson?
Yes.
Councillor Stevens?
Yes.
Councillor Ratzlaff?
Yes.
Councillor Lindell?
Yes.
Councillor Kushner?
Yes.
Councillor Miller?
A hearty yes.
And Mayor Cisco.
A heartier yes.
And that's carried.
All right, moving on to item 9, there are no motions and there are no calls for notices of motion under item number 10. Are there any notices of motion for the next meeting? Seeing none. Now, we don't have a place for report requests, but I know there's a report request, so I'm going to look to Councillor McPherson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. There is a report request. A staff report on options for changing the deputy mayor situation to a 2 or 4 year appointment.
All right, so just looking to the clerk, is that something we can have back for the 28th?
Through the chair, we will draft a report. It's good timing because we would usually bring the report to appoint the deputy mayors November 28th, so we will do our best to bring options to you for that meeting.
Excellent. Do we need a motion just to pass that? Councillor Williamson, all right.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A request for report regarding our committee system, the structure of committees. I think it's a big issue we're going to have to tackle, how we, if we stick with the 3 pillars or what direction we want to go in. So I don't have a specific wording, but I think we need to look at potentially restructuring the committees and looking at the mandates, terms of reference of various committees.
It's interesting you bring that up, Councillor Williamson. I know there was potentially going to be another report request at that meeting on the 28th. So doing the report request now works as well. And I think we'll add that to the list of 2 reports because there's been a lot of discussion about exactly that topic. So it's timely as well. Looking to the clerk, just a motion to, all right. So just can I get a motion to ask for those two reports. Councillor Kushner, seconded Councillor McPherson. All those in favor? Opposed? And that is carried unanimously. Item 11 is closed session. There is nothing in the closed session. Item 12 is the motion arising. There is nothing, which means we are at the motion to adjourn, and I did promise a couple of new councillors that they would be able to make the motion to adjourn tonight. So Councillor Stevens is going to make the motion. Councillor Lindell is going to second it. That there being no further items of business, this meeting be adjourned. All those in favor? Opposed? Good night.